Hello everyone, and welcome to our first of many YouTube review lectures. This is the Emergence of the Modern President, Part 1, from nation building through the age of Jackson. Now I'm just going to cover the basic highlights of these presidents, so hopefully this will go very quickly. In class we'll do some more very specific things. So we'll start with George Washington, our first president. His vice president was John Adams, whom he never actually consulted for anything. His cabinet, Washington is the first president to create a cabinet, was a basic who's who of the best. Secretary of State was Thomas Jefferson. Secretary of the Treasury was Alexander Hamilton. I can also tell you the Secretary of War was Henry Knox. But an issue will emerge between the two men, Jefferson and Hamilton, and how they interpret the Constitution. Jefferson wants to see things in a strict way, where Hamilton is more loosey-goosey, as it were. And this is going to play into the creation of political parties, Jeffersonian Republicans versus Federalists, which will be another review later on. Domestic policies under George Washington. We get the Judiciary Act of 1789, the actual creation of our federal court system, from district courts to appellate courts, all the way up to the Supreme Court. And again, there's Hamilton's economic policies. His assumption, he wants to assume all the state debts as well as the national debt into one big debt. This the South didn't necessarily like. He compromised with Thomas Jefferson and he moved the capital of the new nation south to what would be an area in Virginia in order to get his assumption. He also gets the first tariff, the tariff of 1790, and the first Bank of the United States is created as well. This is where Jefferson and Hamilton really disagree over what is in the Constitution, and Hamilton felt that implied powers were more important, and thereby the bank was constitutional, whereas Jefferson felt it wasn't in the bank, the bank wasn't in the Constitution, thereby it was unconstitutional. But Washington sided with Hamilton's argument on that issue. Foreign policy, there is a revolution taking place in France. They have cut the head off of the King and Queen of France. They've cut their heads off. Washington wants nothing to do with this. Plus, we really don't have an army, we really don't have a navy. So the Neutrality Act of 1793 and 1794 is passed. There's Jay's Treaty, which is really not that good of a treaty. The English are impressing American sailors. Impressment, that's where we force, I say we like I was there doing it, sorry about that, where the British enforce a policy of making American merchant sailors as they capture them on the high sea and force them into the British Navy. He is sent over to England to negotiate a treaty, but the British won't even talk about impressment. Instead, they decide that they'll promise to leave the forts in Ohio, which they lie, and they don't do. Those British. But this treaty led to something called Pinckney's Treaty with Spain that allowed America to sail up and down the Mississippi River. Of course, Washington's also very famous for his farewell address, where he warns the nation of political parties and entangling alliances. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, I probably should have used sound effects, but I'm too lazy to actually do them right now. But political parties entangling alliances, that's pretty much a good profit there in Washington. Both things will really, really ruin American history. There is always a debate on the growing power of the president, and Washington being the first. Obviously, he throws his hat in the ring very quickly. They're what we call formal powers. That's your strict powers, that what the Constitution actually says. So Jay's Treaty would fall under formal powers. The Constitution says the president can negotiate treaties. But your implied powers, that's where the president learns very quickly he can gain a lot of power. That's your loose interpretation of the Constitution. Neutrality Act. Can the President of the United States actually declare neutrality? Some people argue that's an act of war, and only Congress can declare war or decide not to declare war. Well, Washington acted anyway, saying that, well, I have a right to decide on certain areas of treaties, of recognition of other countries, and I'm going to loosely interpret that to allow me to declare neutrality in the French Revolution. Whiskey Rebellion, raising taxes. Can the President of the United States enforce a tax? Again, he implies, loosely interprets the Constitution to allows him to put down the Whiskey Rebellion. And of course, we mentioned it, the first bank of the United States, the bus. That comes out of Article 1, Section 8, that says Congress can create any law they deem necessary and proper. That's all it says, necessary and proper. What's necessary and proper? Who knows? Well, we'll decide for ourselves. We'll loosely interpret that and say, yep, we absolutely need a bank in the United States. Sorry, Jefferson. Well, I'm kind of not very happy about that. I'm going to form my own political party. That was really terrible. I am truly tired. I'm operating on 4 hours of sleep, and that Jefferson accent was terrible. But I'm too lazy to change it. So we'll move on. All right, John Adams, the only Federalist president ever. Remember that. The only Federalist president is John Adams. What a messed up election the election of 1796 was. Washington had two very easy peasy elections. No one runs against him. He's unopposed. The Constitution tells us whoever gets the most electoral votes, president, second most electoral votes, vice president. Well, no one figured out that there was going to be political parties. Jefferson is a Republican, Adams a Federalist. Do the math. It's not a good presidency for John Adams because of this. Again, that word impressment. I don't have it on here, but it's the second time that I've talked about it. Obviously, it's important here. Impressment continues on as an issue for now John Adams. The English won't stop impressing our sailors. Now the French are doing this. Adams sends a delegation to France to negotiate peace. This turns into the XYZ affair. The French won't even speak to the American envoy unless they get a bribe. That's where we get a slogan, millions for defense, not 1 cent for tribute. And America goes into an undeclared war with the French, a naval war, mostly fought in the Caribbean. The Jeffersonian Republicans love the French. They love it. They love. Oui, Paris. They love the French. Fortunately, the Federalists are more inclined to like the British. So as the Jeffersonian Republicans begin to speak out against this war against the French, the Federalists don't like it, so they pass Alien and Sedition Acts. Alien, against immigrants, trying to stop immigrants from being easily become American citizens. So they quickly joined the Federalists, they joined the Jeffersonian Republican Party. Also, stop the Jeffersons from speaking out against the Federalists. So we passed Sedition Acts. Jefferson countered with his Kentucky-Virginia resolutions, compact theory, saying that they had every right, in fact, to nullify these laws. Of course, the resolutions never passed, but this set up what Jefferson called his Revolution of 1800. He took on Adams Part 2 in that election, and this time he beats John Adams. Very important trivial thing now, very important trivial thing being said. Jefferson would not have won the election of 1800 unless this compromise in the Constitution at the Constitution Convention was passed. Well, think about it. Do you got it? 3/5 compromise. That's what allowed Jefferson to become president. Before the Federalists walk away, though, they not only lost the presidency, but they also lost both the House of Representatives and the Senate. So they tried real quick to come up with a plan to keep power. They decided, let's do this in the judiciary branch. So they passed Judiciary Act of 1801. They created more federal judges, created more judges for the Supreme Court. These are known as the midnight judges. Well, really, the saying is that John Adams was up to midnight of the last day of his office, signing judges into their commission. As I told you before, probably somewhere around 9, 10 o'clock at night, but that's not as dramatic, right? The 9:15 judges, that doesn't even make sense. But to say the midnight judges. Jefferson basically tries to ignore this when he becomes president, which sets up the famous court case Marbury versus Madison, which will be in another slide on the Supreme Court. Let's talk about Thomas Jefferson, presidency now, 1801, 1809. Is he loose? Is he strict? Is he loose? Is he strict? Is he strict? Is he loose? I don't know. Do you know? I don't know. Jefferson? Well, sometimes I think it's supposed to be important to be strict. Again, that's terrible. I just got to stop doing that. I can't do the lith. There's the lith. That's the lith? That's a better one. Okay, so as you know, Jefferson didn't like public speaking because he talked very lightly in a very slow southern drawl and perhaps a nice lisp. So he started the process of not giving speeches, right? He would write out his speeches and send them to Congress to be read by somebody else. But he did flip-flop a lot on strict or loose constructionism. He basically is a strict constructionist, but he becomes to understand that at times you need to be a little loose. Louisiana Purchase, hello. Does it say in the Constitution the president can negotiate a land treaty? Well, there's some things in there that allows him to say, well, there's kind of this, there's kind of that. Hello. It's 15 cents an acre. Please, you've got to buy that. Even Jefferson understood that. States' rights obviously is an issue for people who are strict constructionists. Remember Jefferson and his compact theory. That's states' rights issues. There's Marbury versus Madison. Again, that's a Supreme Court case that decided the issue of the midnight judges. That gave the Supreme Court the power of judicial review. And again, later on, there will be a Supreme Court review. We'll talk about that more in depth there. The Embargo Act. What is embargo backwards? Embargo backwards. Grab me. This cursed, grab me. Jefferson again, what is the issue? What is the issue? Impressment. Third time I've said it. Impressment. There must be something I want you to know about that. The British won't stop impressing American sailors. And it gets really bad, and they actually wind up attacking an American ship, the Chesapeake. This was an act of war. But Jefferson decided, I don't want to go to war. Who wants to go to war? No war for me. We'll embargo. We'll tell both the French and the English, we won't trade with you anymore. You are so dependent upon our stuff, you will beg us to start trading again, and thereby you will stop impressment. Did it work? No, it did not work. In fact, it hurt what? American economy instead. The Embargo Act. Well, this brings us then to this era of good feelings moment. The Federalists basically are they're kind of on the down. Within a few years, there won't even be a Federalist Party anymore. So the era of good feelings really is supposed to be this era of a one-party system. You get James Madison as a two-term president. The War of 1812 happens during his time period. The war that America, don't tell anybody this, okay? Listening? America loses this war. Shh. But we count it as a win because we're America, and that's how we roll. All right? Hey, the British, they burned down the White House, just in case you wanted to know that. So this War of 1812 takes place. What was the big issues? Well, let's see. Forts in Ohio. They never left, even though they promised after the American Revolution. They promised in Jay's Treaty, and finally they're gone because of the War of 1812. They're still there. Arming Indians on the frontier, causing Indians to constantly attack. A guy named Tecumseh. Remember that guy? And impressment. Don't forget, impressment. Well, one of the things that's really important to also notice about James Madison's presidency, he is a Thomas Jefferson disciple to the full and a strict constructionist, but there's an issue now with the bank. Remember the first bank? Jefferson didn't like the first bank, but it passed. It got a 20-year charter from 1791 to 1811. 1811, Madison's president. Guess what? We're not going to renew your charter. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, bus. Then the War of 1812 happens. No way to finance it. That's a problem. So you know what? Jeffersonian Republicans have to swallow their principles and kind of become a little bit loosey-goosey themselves and bring back a second bus, a second bank in the United States, 1816. It's supposed to be around for 20 years to 1836. I wonder if that will happen or not. Spoiler alerts. James Monroe. This is really when the era of good feelings kick in because the Federalists, they're now gone. They're now gone. No more Federalists. And it's really not the greatest time of good feelings, actually. There's a panic of 1819. There's a huge slavery crisis happens. Missouri wants to come in as a slave state, upset all the balance in Congress possibly. Everyone's up at arms. People are ready to fight. They come up with this idea, hey, let's do a gradual emancipation in Missouri. No one liked that either. Henry Clay. Now, this is not Henry Clay's compromise. He gets all the credit because he dominates the debate, and we get this compromise gets passed in 1820. Missouri can come in as a slave state. We're going to establish a latitude line to 3630. Everything above the 3630 will be free, which is the majority of the Louisiana Territory. Everything south will be a slave territory. Of course, then Maine is also created so that Missouri can come in as a slave state and Maine can come in as a free state. Now, I don't have the map here, but you can look at a map anywhere you want. You can see that it seems like the North got the bulk of the land, but the South looked at the map and they said, hey, Texas is ripe for the picking. So they were okay with that because they kind of figured eventually Texas is going to come in and probably be divided up and become a bunch of slave states for them. The Monroe Doctrine. That's telling the European powers, hey, you got to stay out of Latin America or we will basically slap you around with actually nothing. We don't have a navy, don't have an army, but it's a nice little threat. And it really was only the policy of James Monroe, but other presidents down the line, Teddy Roosevelt, are going to use it to their fullest advantage. Hey, look, we got another Adams. Da-da-da-dun. John Quincy Adams. He came to presidency from what is known as the corrupt bargain. Andrew Jackson really gets mad. He thought he won the election of 1824. No, he didn't. You see, he didn't get enough votes in the Electoral College, so it had to go to the House. And Henry Clay's in the House. And guess what? Clay, Jackson, don't like each other. John Quincy Adams, President of the United States. Henry Clay becomes Secretary of State. Corrupt bargain? Maybe. Probably not, though. Adams and Clay are actually not a bunch of backstabbing double dealers that the Jackson clan will always claim they are. We have one political party, Jefferson Republicans, but they're now divided into two factions, National Republicans and Democratic Republicans. And eventually that's going to form two new parties. So we're now in the age of Jackson. Social and political changes are starting to happen. Universal manhood suffrage. All white males can now vote. Yes! Well, it's a step in the right direction. Let's just say that. The Democratic Party will now become official. That's Andrew Jackson calls themselves the Democrats. And the National Republicans will go off to form the Whig Party under Henry Clay and Daniel Webster. The Second Great Awakening is also happening at this time period. Massive religious reforms and all those social movements as well. Abolition, temperance movement, suffrage movement, education reform, prison and asylum reform, the transcendentalists. Oh my, so many reforms all at one time. We'll end it with this one here, with the age of Jackson time period. You've got Jackson as president in the beginning, obviously, the nullification crisis. This is when South Carolina, under Vice President John C. Calhoun, decides they don't like tariffs. Tariffs eventually bother them, because if you can raise my taxes, you can take away my slaves. So they create the South Carolina Exposition. Compact theory comes back. Jefferson's compact theory. We can nullify laws of the federal government. Jackson threatens to burn everybody's house down. Jackson wins. With the help, by the way, of Henry Clay and a tariff compromise. Indian removal. Love you, Indians, but you can't stay here on our side of the country anymore. Who took America to court? Think. Who took America to court? The Cherokee. The Cherokee Indian took them to court. First you had Georgia versus Cherokee Nation. They lose. Then you had Worcester versus Georgia. They win. Did Jackson actually honor that? No, not really. Remember the Second Bank of the United States. It's supposed to last to 1836. our good friend Henry Clay decides he wants to run for president again. What is he thinking? I don't know. Anyways, so in that election, let's see, that would be the election of 1832. They decide to make that the campaign issue. Let's recharter the bank now and show America just how dumb Jackson is when it comes to economics. Guess what? So is America. He vetoes the recharter bill, tells everyone that Clay and all their people, a bunch of monopolists who want to run the country and allow foreign investment to come in here. America says, you're right, Andrew Jackson. We don't like Clay either. And they crush Henry Clay in the election of 32. Well, the bank still has 4 years left on its charter. Not Jackson around, it does it. He destroys it. Remember, he goes through two different Secretary of the Treasuries before he gets one of them that says, all right, I'll take all the money out of the bank and we'll put it into what we call pet banks, thereby killing the bank, letting it die of a slow economic death. Dun, 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 dun. Jackson handpicks his successor, his vice president, Martin Van Buren. Poor Martin Van Buren. He is the guy who actually forces the Cherokee out of Georgia, and then he inherits a massive panic, the Panic of 1837, this huge, huge economic crisis. He becomes Martin Van Ruin. The election of 1840, the Whig Party smells victory. They could have nominated Henry Clay. They don't want him. They want their own general, William Henry Harrison, the victor of Tippecanoe, who is like 1,000 years old at the time period. He's ridiculously old, let's just say that. They tell Henry Clay, you know what, you could be vice president. Henry Clay's like, I don't want that. Oh, no. William Henry Harrison, the shortest lived president ever, the first president to die in office, gives that long inaugural address over 2 hours in the cold, no hat, no scarf, no jacket, gets a cold. He dies. John Tyler, who's a Whig in Democratic clothing, turns out he's really a Democrat, now becomes President of the United States. It could have been Henry Clay. Oh, well, too bad, Henry Clay. Sorry. A moment of silence, please. All right, now we'll move on. John Tyler does everything he can to really make the Whigs mad, so he becomes the first and only president to be voted out of his own party. The age of Jackson comes to an end with James K. Polk, the true heir successor of Andrew Jackson. Sometimes Andrew Jackson is called Old Hickory. James K. Polk was called Young Hickory. He introduced Manifest Destiny. America must go from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific. That means Mexicans, here we come. War with Mexico happens now. 1846, 1848. Also California comes into the fold. Texas comes into the fold. Oregon, he campaigned on the promise 54-40 or fight. That was with the English. The English had Oregon. But a compromise is made and they settle on a shorter boundary, and now we have Oregon. He actually adds more land to the United States than any other president ever. James K. Polk, one-term president, terrible, terrible sufferer of dysentery. Another moment of silence, please. All right, very good. Well, that's it. I hope that was a short enough presentation for you. This is part 1. Tomorrow I'll be looking for part 2. Good night.